Welcome to Marking the End Times. I'm Mark Hitchcock, and as always, it's great to have you join us for these programs, these weekly programs that we produce. And we're trying in these programs to help you understand things that are happening in our world today through the lens of biblical prophecy. And there's so many things happening in our world today. It's often difficult, to decide, what do we want to talk about, because there's so many different things that are happening. But what I want to do today is I want to talk about this leak of documents that took place, this Pentagon, these 100 documents that were leaked from the Pentagon, a lot of information in there. I want to talk about one specific leak that relates to Egypt. Egypt is a key player in the end times, according to Daniel chapter 11. So I want to talk about that, what these leaks reveal about Egypt and really what they're up to, what they're doing. During the subscriber only section, I want to answer a question. Someone asked the question, could the signing of the Abraham Accords back in September of 2020, could that have been the beginning of the tribulation period? A lot of people today wonder, are we in the tribulation? There's a lot of people who believe that. And so I want to answer that question. There's another question about the resurrections. You have a first resurrection and a second resurrection spoken of in Revelation 20. And it kind of seems like maybe there's more than two resurrections there, the way it's stated. So I want to talk about the resurrections. And then also someone has asked a question about some secrets in Gaza, some things that may be happening in Gaza. So we'll answer that question as well. But that'll be during the subscriber section. But what I want to talk about again during our time is this massive leak of documents from the Pentagon earlier this year that was basically just exposed on April the 6th. About 100 leaked documents. And here's the way one person describes this. They say it's a stunning leak of a cache of classified Pentagon documents that appears to be one of the most significant breaches of U.S. intelligence in decades, purportedly revealing national security secrets regarding Ukraine, Russia, Asia, and the Middle East, as well as details about U.S. espionage methods and the country's spying on adversaries and allies. So this is a really shocking, surprising leak that's taken place. Now, there have been a lot of leaks been taking place from our government over the years, but this one here could really do a lot of damage. There are several surprising revelations that are in this, and some are wondering if part of this could be disinformation. So they're having to kind of sift through it and figure out, okay, what is true that's in these leaks and what could maybe be disinformation. But one of the things that came out in these leaks are some really troubling statements about Egypt. Here's the way one headline reads: Egypt wanted to arm Russia with thousands of rockets in secret to avoid problems with the West, report claims. And then the subtitle says, leak shows Egypt wanted to send 40,000 rockets to Russia. Now, Egypt is one of the world's top recipients of American aid. They receive a lot of aid from America. And obviously, this would be contrary to American policy for them to be supplying all these rockets to Russia, because at the same time, the U.S. is supporting Ukraine in this war. But this tranche of documents showed the plan to aid Moscow would have been secret. And an official was instructed by the Egyptian president to tell the workers that the rockets were meant for the Egyptian army. So we're trying to, sneak around and do this. Now, as you can imagine, Egypt has come out and they've strongly denied these reports. Egypt has denied this categorically. They've denied any plan that they have to collaborate with Russia. And the U.S. government has said that there's no evidence that this rocket export was ever executed. So, some are wondering, again, could this be, this misinformation? But Forbes magazine has a really interesting article. They say this: Egypt's purported plan to covertly supply Russia with rockets could have been motivated by Cairo's need for a steady food supply for the millions of Egyptian citizens relying on heavily subsidized bread. The war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, has crippled the food supply to Egypt. In fact, I was reading this last week, 70%, 70 million of the 104 million citizens in Egypt receive a bread subsidy from the government. Think about that. 70% of the people have to have a bread subsidy from the government just to survive. So what Forbes magazine's saying here is it makes a lot of sense that Cairo or that Egypt would be engaging in this activity with Russia to get more food. In other words, kind of trading these rockets for more food supply. The article goes on and says this, citing a leaked top secret U.S. intelligence document dated February 17th, the Washington Post reported that Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi discussed a plan to manufacture 40,000 rockets for a covert shipment to Russia, along with artillery rounds and gunpowder with his senior military personnel. According to the document, Cairo hoped to keep the plan under wraps to avoid antagonizing its Western allies, especially the United States. Now, all of this is interesting to me because Egypt, I believe, does play a key role in end-time prophecy. A lot of people don't realize this, but there are approximately 250 verses in the Old Testament, which at the time they were written were prophecies yet to take place in Egypt. There are 5 main passages that deal with Egypt in prophecy. Let me just give these to you. You might want to write these down and read them. Isaiah 11, 15, and 16, Isaiah 19, Jeremiah 46, Ezekiel 29 to 32, 4 whole chapters there, and then Daniel 11, 40 to 43. That's really a critical one, Daniel 11, 40 to 43. Now, during this present age, it's interesting, the Bible says that Egypt will never be a major international power. Now, that's interesting. I mean, Egypt was a great power in the past, but the Bible predicted long ago that Egypt would never again be a major international power. Ezekiel 29:15 says this, but Egypt will remain an unimportant minor kingdom. It will be the lowliest of all the nations, never again great enough to rise above its neighbors. Again, we see that today with 70% of the people there needing a bread subsidy. So that's a fulfilled prophecy that we see today that, again, just validates and confirms the inspiration of the Bible. In fact, one writer puts it like this. He says, this has been true in Egypt's history. After Persia's rise to power, Egypt never again became a major independent international power. Egypt was successfully ruled over by Greece, Rome, the Saracens, the Mamelukes, the Turks, and the British. Until 1922, Egypt remained under the sovereignty of some foreign power. The existence of the sovereign nation of Egypt today, however, is in preparation for her significant role in the end times. So Egypt has risen to some degree of power today. And again, that's in preparation for Egypt's role that they're going to fulfill in the end times. Now, we talk often here at endtimes.com about the Gog coalition, about the Ezekiel 38:39 prophecy, the invasion of Gog and Magog into the land of Israel. And we often talk about this northern coalition of nations that will come into Israel. And we often talk about Russia and Iran and Turkey that'll form kind of this northern coalition. But in Daniel chapter 11, I think we have a parallel passage to Ezekiel chapter 38. In Daniel 11, verse 40, it says, at the end time, the king of the south. Now, if you read in the context here, the king of the south is Egypt and a couple of other nations in North Africa. The king of the south will collide with him, that is with the Antichrist, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots. The king of the north here is this great power to the north of Israel. So it says in the end times, the king of the south and the king of the north, these two coalitions are going to come together to fight against the Antichrist. Well, remember that whenever these nations attack Israel in Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Antichrist is going to have a treaty with Israel. So an attack against Israel will be an attack against the Antichrist. So when Ezekiel 38 and 39, they attack Israel, they're really attacking the Antichrist as well because he has this peace treaty with the nation of Israel. So the Bible tells us that this king of the south, this coalition of North African nations will be Egypt. And then we have Libya mentioned here. And then in Ezekiel 38, we have Sudan mentioned, the nation of Cush, and also Put, which is Libya. Now, Egypt is kind of, it seems like secretly going behind the back of the United States to send these rockets to Russia and gunpowder and other implements of war, which shows again their tie to Russia. The Sudan, in fact, just about a month or two ago, Russia, all the approval went through for Russia to build a Navy base on the Red Sea. They're in Sudan. Russia has a strong military presence in Libya. So all of these nations really are within the Russian orbit. They're kind of within Russia's control and power. So this is kind of a picture here of this king of the south, or this coalition of nations coming together. At the same time, you have this northern coalition coming together of Russia and Iran and Turkey. And at some point in time, they're going to all join together. So Egypt, the king of the south, is going to lead this North African confederacy against Israel, I believe, during that first half of the tribulation period. And this conspiracy, or this confederacy, is going to join Libya and Sudan. They're going to be joined by Russia, who's the king of the north, in this invasion. And Egypt's army is going to be destroyed by God. We find out in Ezekiel 38. After Egypt's army is destroyed, Daniel 11 tells us that the Antichrist is going to come in and plunder the nation of Egypt. And Egypt's going to become a desolation, according to Isaiah chapter 19. So these leaks are just kind of another kind of a window into where Egypt really is today. Their alliances and their allegiances, I think, ultimately lie with Russia, who's also controlling Sudan and Libya. So at the same time we see this northern coalition in Gog and Magog coming together, we see this southern coalition beginning to form as well, which I think is very significant. Well, as always, thank you so much for taking time to watch this video. We're going to go now to the subscriber-only section, where I'm going to answer that question about could we be in the tribulation now? Could the Abraham Accords signed by President Trump and these nations with Israel back in September of 2000, could that have been the beginning of the tribulation? We're going to talk about the first and second resurrection in Revelation chapter 20. If you're not a subscriber and you'd like to be, you can go to endtimes.com, and just for a really small investment in your spiritual life of just $7 a month, you can become a subscriber. And I think you'll find it to be very, very, very worthwhile for your spiritual life if you do that. But we'll go now to the subscriber-only section and answer these questions. Now, the first question is this. Could Donald Trump signing the Abraham Accords on September 15th of 2020 have started the tribulation? You know, that's interesting. There are a lot of people today that have this idea that we're already in the tribulation period, that the tribulation has already started. I don't agree with that, and I don't think Donald Trump signing the Abraham Accords started the tribulation. Several reasons for that. One is, I believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. So I would believe that before the tribulation can start, the rapture of the church has to take place. Well, obviously the rapture didn't happen before September 15th, 2020. So if my view of the timing of the rapture is correct, then obviously that can't be the beginning of the tribulation period. Now, if someone believes in, a mid-tribulation rapture, a post-tribulation rapture, maybe they could somehow see this as the beginning of that. But if you hold the pre-tribulation rapture, that pretty much negates the fact that this could be the beginning of the tribulation. Another point is, for this to be true, Donald Trump would have to be the Antichrist. And Donald Trump doesn't have any of the characteristics of what we know about the Antichrist. He comes from the United States. I think the Antichrist is going to come from Europe, from the confines of the old Roman Empire. It says in Daniel 9:26 that the people of that coming prince, that is the coming Antichrist, are those who destroyed the temple back in 70 AD. Now, I don't think that necessarily means the Antichrist will be an Italian, but I do think it means that he will come from the Roman Empire. So obviously Donald Trump was an American president, not from the Roman Empire of that day. Also, we haven't seen the things that you would expect if the tribulation's begun. The seventh seals haven't been opened. The first seal is the coming of the Antichrist, a rider on the white horse. You have the rider on the red horse, which is warfare and bloodshed breaking out all over the earth. The rider on the black horse, which is famine and hyperinflation, global hyperinflation. Certainly we've seen an escalation in inflation, but nothing like what you see there in Revelation chapter 6. And then in the fourth seal judgment, a fourth of the earth dies. And all of that's happening, I believe, during the first half of the tribulation period. So there's really not anything that we see happening that would indicate that we're in the tribulation period. In fact, everything we see happening goes against that. Now, I do believe that the Abraham Accords could be a foreshadow and could be part of the setup for this treaty that the Antichrist will make with Israel. So I see it as a very important stage setting that's happening. But there's a difference between something that's a foreshadow of a prophecy and the fulfillment of a prophecy. So that's not the fulfillment of the signing of the 7-year covenant the Antichrist is going to make with Israel, but it certainly is a foreshadow of what we see coming. And I think for that reason, it is very important. Second question. Please help me understand how the dead are resurrected at the rapture before the tribulation. But Revelation 20, verses 4 and 5 says the rest of the dead who weren't tribulation saints brought back to life to reign with Christ during the millennium will be resurrected after the millennial reign. This specifically calls it the first resurrection. Can you help me make sense of all of this? Well, I hope I can. It's interesting. Let me read Revelation 20, verses 4 and 5, and then I want to read some other verses as well. Revelation 20, verse 5 says, they came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. That's talking about people resurrected at the second coming of Jesus, when he returns to the earth at his second coming to set up his 1,000-year kingdom. Tribulation saints, those who've died during the tribulation, and I believe Old Testament saints as well, will be resurrected at that time. And then they said the rest of the dead didn't come to life until after the 1,000 years were completed. And then it says, this is the first resurrection. It's referring to those who come to life at Christ's second coming. So Old Testament saints resurrected, tribulation saints, those who died during the tribulation period, resurrected. That's called the first resurrection. And then it says, blessed are holy in those who share in the first resurrection. So I think that the Bible is clear in the New Testament that there are two resurrections. There's what we call the first resurrection and the second resurrection, or the resurrection of the righteous, the resurrection of the unrighteous, the resurrection of those who are righteous and good, or the resurrection of the evil. Let me just read a couple verses, and then I'll explain this a little bit more in detail. In John 5:28, Jesus said this, do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in the graves will hear the voice of the Son of Man, and they'll come out. Those who've done what is good will rise to live. Those who've done what is evil will rise to be condemned. So two resurrections. There's a resurrection of those who've done what's good or the righteous, and there's the resurrection of those who've done what's evil. In Acts 24:15, Paul, the Apostle Paul says this, I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have. There will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So two resurrections, a resurrection of the righteous and the wicked. Now, 1 Corinthians 15 helps us out in this. I'll read it in just a moment. But what I think we have here in the New Testament is there's two resurrections. The first resurrection is the resurrection of the righteous. The second resurrection is the resurrection of the wicked. The resurrection of the wicked will happen. All the evil, all the wicked will be resurrected at the end of the millennial kingdom, the end of Christ's 1,000-year reign, to be judged at the great white throne judgment. They'll all be resurrected at the same time. But the first resurrection, the resurrection of the righteous, is going to occur in stages or phases. So you have a first resurrection and a second resurrection, but the first resurrection has phases to it. And those phases are Christ's resurrection. He's the first fruits. He's the first one to be resurrected. Then you'll have church age believers who are resurrected at the time the rapture takes place before the tribulation. Then at the end of the tribulation, there'll be a resurrection of tribulation saints, those who died during the tribulation period, as well as Old Testament saints. They'll be resurrected. So it's going to happen in phases, but it's all called the first resurrection. So the first resurrection, you could look at it like this. It's a kind of resurrection. Let me read 1 Corinthians 15:20. But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who've fallen asleep. So Christ is the first in this stage of this first resurrection, the first phase. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes through a man. For as also in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive, but each in turn. Each in turn. That's an interesting word there. In the Greek, it's the word tagma, and it referred to like the kind of the different companies in a military parade. So, you're watching a military parade go by of troops, and, like Company A will go by, and then Company B, and then Company C. So they each kind of go by in their own order. And he's saying that's the way the resurrection of the righteous is going to be. We're going to each be resurrected in our own order. So Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection. Then they're going to be those who are resurrected again at the rapture. those who are resurrected at the second coming. So it says, each in turn, Christ the first fruits, then when he comes, those who belong to him. So what's going to happen is, again, Christ was the first fruits of this first resurrection. The rapture will be kind of phase 2 of this, when church age believers are raised. Then the end of the tribulation period will be Old Testament saints and tribulation saints resurrected. All that's the first resurrection. And then at the end of the millennium, end of the 1,000-year reign of Christ, that will be the second resurrection, the resurrection of the unjust, where they're going to be resurrected then to be condemned before the great white throne judgment. So I hope that clarifies this a little bit. I think when we see that the first resurrection is a kind of resurrection that happens in phases, that helps clarify that, I think. So I hope that's helpful. Here's our final question. I heard a word from the Lord last year. It was secrets in Gaza. Do you have any insight into what is happening there? Every so often, there are archaeological discoveries in Gaza, and I know it's part of the disputed territory, but is there any end times impact related to it? Well, I don't know of any major secrets in Gaza or archaeological discoveries that have been made there. I do know that obviously in Gaza right now, they're shooting a lot of rockets into Israel. It's a hot spot there today. There's rockets being shot from up in northern Israel from Hezbollah, who is a proxy of Iran. Obviously, you have Islamic Jihad and other groups are in Gaza, which is to the west. It's got that western coast of Israel, southwestern coast, where the Palestinians are concentrated. They're firing a lot of rockets into southern Israel. So certainly Gaza today is a hot spot and continues to be a hot spot. Israel's been doing some bombing there to try to eradicate and root out a lot of these terrorist cells that are shooting rockets into Israel. But beyond that, I'm not really aware of anything that's, some secrets in Gaza that holds some secret meaning for us. Well, as always, thank you so much for being a subscriber. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. We always appreciate that. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you.